The cargo ship Wandering Star drifted through the black silence of space like a tired whale, crossing an endless ocean. Its hull was scarred with the marks of 1,000 journeys, patches of newer metal gleaming against the older plating. Inside the bridge, Captain Elena Vasquez sat in her command chair with a cup of coffee growing cold in her hand. She watched the stars slide past on the main screen, each one a sun that some alien species called home. The galaxy was old, much older than humanity's presence in it. When humans finally cracked faster than light travel and stumbled out into the cosmic neighborhood, they found a civilization already waiting. The Galactic Assembly had rules for everything. Rules for trade, rules for territory, rules for how species should talk to each other. Most important of all, they had rules for war. War in the galaxy was not like the wars humans remembered from Earth. It was calculated, almost mathematical. Two fleets would meet, assess their relative strength, and the weaker side would surrender. This made sense to everyone. Why waste ships and lives when the outcome was already clear? Resources were precious in space. Every bullet fired was metal that could have built a habitat. Every ship destroyed was years of labor lost forever. 40 species had joined the assembly over the last 10,000 years. All of them understood this basic logic. Surrender was not shameful. It was intelligent. Most conflicts ended with minimal casualties. Terms were negotiated and life went on. The galaxy had achieved a kind of peace through mutual understanding of mathematical reality. Humanity had been part of this community for only 70 years. They nodded at the rules, signed the treaties, and sent their ships out into the trade lanes. Ships like the Wandering Star, carrying mining equipment and medical supplies to the colony worlds humans were slowly building in their small corner of space. Elena set down her coffee and checked the navigation display. They were crossing through a region called the Outer Margin, a sparse area between the major trade routes. It was quiet here, which was exactly why the Wandering Star used this path. The big commercial ships crowded the main lanes, and Elena preferred the solitude. Her first officer, James Chen, was running through a maintenance checklist at his station. Behind them, the bridge crew of 6 worked quietly at their posts. Everything was routine. Everything was normal. Elena had made this run 40 times in the past 3 years without incident. The proximity alarm shattered the calm. 5 contacts appeared on the sensor screen, emerging from FTL space in a coordinated pattern. They formed a loose net around the Wandering Star, cutting off escape vectors. Elena felt her heart rate increase but kept her expression neutral. Pirates were rare but not unheard of in the Outer Margin. Reading their transponders now, Chen said, his fingers dancing across his console. Crethian Registry. Known pirate clan. They've hit over 200 ships in the past decade. Elena nodded slowly. The Crethians were reptilian, cold-blooded in both biology and temperament. They had turned piracy into a business model. Board a ship, take the cargo, let the crew go. Most species paid insurance that covered such losses. It was cheaper than fighting. The communication channel crackled to life. A translated voice, harsh and confident, filled the bridge. Human vessel Wandering Star, you are surrounded. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Surrender your cargo and you will not be harmed. This is standard procedure. Do not resist. The Crethian commander spoke like someone reading from a script, because that was exactly what he was doing. This speech had worked on 40 different species. Merchants always chose life over property. It was the logical choice. Elena looked at her crew. Chen met her eyes and gave a slight nod. At the engineering station, Sarah Rodriguez's hand moved to her console, ready. The weapons officer, Marcus Webb, cracked his knuckles quietly. Everyone knew their role. Everyone had trained for this, Captain. Chen asked softly. Your orders? Elena took a long breath and opened the return channel. When she spoke, her voice was steady and cold. Crethian vessels, this is Captain Vasquez of the Wandering Star. You've made a mistake. There was a pause. The Crethian commander seemed confused by the response. It was not part of his script. There is no mistake, human. You are outgunned 5-1. Surrender is your only option. This is your final warning. Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of someone who knew something the other person did not. She muted the channel and turned to her crew. Battle stations. Send the distress beacon on all human frequencies. And someone wake up Rodriguez. The bridge transformed. Panels slid open, revealing additional control stations. Crew members strapped into harnesses. The casual atmosphere evaporated. replaced by focused intensity. Chen's fingers flew across his console, activating systems that had been dormant but ready. "Distress beacon active," he reported. "The nearest human patrol is 4 hours out." "They won't need 4 hours," Elena said quietly. "The Crithians intercepted the distress signal, of course." Their commander laughed, a hissing sound that the translator rendered as amusement. "Calling for help, human? No one can reach you in time. Surrender now or we will open fire." What the Crithians did not know, what none of the other species in the galaxy truly understood, was that humans approached space travel differently. Every human ship, even the cargo haulers, was built with one underlying assumption: help might not arrive in time. "Rodriguez protocol is active," Sarah announced from her station. "All systems green." The Crithians did not know that Rodriguez was not a person. It was a protocol, named after a naval captain from Earth's 21st century who had been vastly outgunned and chose to fight anyway. Every human child learned the story in school. Captain Rodriguez had known he would lose, had known he would die, but had decided that if he was going to die, he would make the enemy pay for every meter of ocean. Humanity had taken that lesson to the stars. "Weapons free," Elena ordered. "Target their engines first. Let's teach these lizards what happens when you threaten humans." The Crithian commander was still waiting for the logical surrender when the first railgun slug punched through his shields and tore into one of his escort ships. The second shot followed milliseconds later, and the pirate vessel erupted in a ball of expanding gas and debris. On the Wandering Star's bridge, alarms wailed as return fire hammered their shields. But Elena was not worried. The cargo containers were already unfolding, revealing the teeth beneath the merchant ship's disguise. "Welcome to human space," she whispered, and gave the order to fire everything. The galaxy had rules for warfare. Humanity had never agreed to play by them. The Crithians were about to learn the difference between a civilization that fought to win and a species that fought to survive. The Crithian fleet scattered like startled birds as another pirate ship exploded into fragments. Commander Zekthor stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The sensors had to be malfunctioning. Cargo ships did not fight back. Prey did not attack predators. It violated the natural order of things. But the human ship was not following any order that Zekthor understood. The Wandering Star spun on its axis, maneuvering thrusters firing in precise bursts. What had looked like standard cargo containers were transforming, unfolding like metal flowers to reveal weapons that should not exist on a civilian vessel. Railgun batteries extended from recessed bays. Missile tubes opened along the flanks. Point defense cannons emerged from the hull like thorns. "All ships evasive pattern 7, Zekthor commanded. 2 of his vessels were already gone, reduced to cooling debris. 3 remained, including his own. They were still superior in firepower. They could still win this. They had to win this. On the Wandering Star, Elena watched the tactical display with the calm focus of someone who had trained for this moment her entire career. Every merchant captain in the human fleet was also a military officer. Every crew member had combat training. It was not because humans were more violent than other species. It was because humans had learned a hard lesson over thousands of years of bloody history. The universe did not owe anyone safety. "Target lock on Vessel 3, Marcus reported from weapons. "Firing solution ready." "Fire," Elena said simply. The missile streaked across the void, its drive burning bright. The Crithian ship tried to evade, but human guidance systems were designed by a species that had started by throwing rocks at each other and had refined the art over millennia. The missile struck the pirate vessel's flank and detonated, tearing through armor and venting atmosphere into space. Zekthor felt his ship shudder as debris from the explosion peppered his shields. 3 ships lost. Only his command vessel and 1 escort remained. This was impossible. Cargo ships did not do this. Merchants did not fight like warships. He opened a channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. His voice carried the formal cadence of the ancient surrender protocols, words that had ended conflicts for 10,000 years. "Human vessel, we surrender. Ceasefire immediately. We invoke the protection of the Galactic Assembly conventions. Our weapons are powering down. We surrender." There was a long moment of silence. Zekthor waited, his heart pounding in his chest. Every species honored the surrender protocol. It was the foundation of civilized warfare. To refuse a surrender was unthinkable. Elena's voice came back cold and flat. Surrender denied. You initiated combat. You fired on civilians. There is no surrender for you. Zekthor felt something he had never experienced in 20 years of piracy. Fear. Real fear. You cannot refuse our surrender. It violates every law of the Assembly. We have surrendered. Your surrender is meaningless to us, Elena replied. You wanted a fight. Now you have one. I suggest you make it interesting. The concept was so alien, so completely outside Zekthor's understanding of how conflicts worked, that for a moment he simply froze. His crew stared at him, waiting for orders. One of his officers, a younger Crethian named Seknal, spoke up. Commander, we must flee. They are not rational. They are not following any protocol. Zekthor wanted to argue, wanted to insist that there had to be some way to make the humans see reason, but another part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive in the dangerous regions of space, was screaming at him to run. All remaining ships jump to FTL, he ordered. Random vectors. Go now. But even as he gave the command, he saw new contacts appearing on his sensors. 3 ships, massive compared to the wandering star, dropped out of faster-than-light space in a coordinated attack formation. They were warships, real military vessels, and they had arrived impossibly fast. This is the UHSN Indomitable, a new voice announced over the communication channels. Crithian vessels, you are ordered to power down all systems and prepare to be taken into custody. Any attempt to flee or fight will result in your immediate destruction. Zekthor looked at the time display. 37 minutes. 37 minutes since the human cargo ship had sent its distress signal. His fleet had been in a system 42 light-years from the nearest human colony. No species in the galaxy had faster-than-light drives that could cover that distance in less than 6 hours. Except humans. The human warships moved with deadly precision, forming a triangle around the surviving pirate vessels. Zekthor could see the weapons arrays on their hulls, could read the power signatures of systems that dwarfed anything his ships carried. These were not converted cargo haulers. These were ships built for one purpose only, killing. Commander, what do we do? Seknal asked, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Zekthor made a decision. He opened the channel again, addressing the human warships directly. Human vessels, this is Commander Zekthor of the Crithian Conquered. We surrender. We invoke assembly protection. We surrender denied, the voice from the Indomitable cut him off. The human commander sounded almost bored. You fired on civilians. You attempted to board a civilian vessel by force. Under human law, you are classified as hostile combatants engaged in acts of war against non-combatants. There is no surrender for you. But the assembly is not here. We are. You have 10 seconds to power down your weapons. If you do not comply, we will fire. This is your only warning. Zekthor looked at his tactical officer. Power down everything. Weapons, shields, engines, everything. The bridge lights dimmed as systems went offline. Through the viewport, Zekthor could see the human warships closing in. Smaller craft launched from their bays. Boarding shuttles. What are they going to do to us? Seknal whispered. Zekthor did not answer because he did not know. In all his years of piracy, he had surrendered twice before to superior forces. Both times he had paid fines, spent time in detention, and eventually been released. That was how civilized species handled captured pirates. That was how the galaxy worked. But the humans were not following the rules of the galaxy. The boarding shuttles clamped onto his hull with heavy thuds. Zekthor heard cutting torches beginning to work on the airlocks. He thought about resisting, about ordering his crew to fight, but what would be the point? They were outgunned and outmatched. The airlocks blew open with explosive charges. Human soldiers poured through, armored and armed with weapons that looked designed to kill efficiently. They moved through the ship like a trained unit, securing every section, disarming every crew member they found. Zekthor was taken to the brig of the Indomitable, along with his surviving crew. As the cell door sealed behind him, he stared at the human guard standing watch outside. Why? He asked. Why refuse surrender? Why break the protocols? The guard looked at him with an expression that might have been pity. Because you attacked civilians. Because you thought you could threaten humans and we would just give you what you wanted. You need to understand something that every other species seems to have missed. Humans do not surrender. We do not quit. And we do not forget when someone tries to hurt our people. Zekthor sat down on the bench in his cell and tried to process what was happening. Somewhere in his mind, he knew that this was bigger than just his failed piracy attempt. This was going to change everything. The galaxy thought it knew what humans were. The galaxy was wrong. Outside, the human fleet was already moving, already preparing for what came next. Because the Crithians were going to want revenge for this humiliation, and humans were going to show the galaxy exactly what happened when you started a fight you could not finish. The Galactic Assembly Chamber was built to inspire awe. It hung in orbit above the neutral world of Centrum, a massive ring structure that housed representatives from 40 species. The chamber itself was a sphere of transparent aluminum, offering views of the planet below and the stars beyond. Today, those stars seemed cold and distant. Ambassador David Chen stood at the human podium, his dark suit a stark contrast to the colorful robes and environmental suits worn by the other delegates. He had been in this chamber hundreds of times over the past decade, usually discussing trade agreements or territorial disputes. Today was different. On the main holographic display, footage played from the Crithian pirate attack. The assembly watched in silence as the wandering star transformed from cargo ship to warship. They watched the battle. They watched the human vessels arrive and refuse the Crithian surrender. The footage ended with the pirates being taken into custody. This is barbaric. The Crithian ambassador, a towering reptilian named Kreshivor, slammed his tail against the floor for emphasis. The humans violated the most sacred protocol of civilized warfare. Surrender was offered and refused. This cannot stand. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Telvanni delegate, an insectoid whose translated voice buzzed with agitation, spoke up. The surrender protocol has maintained peace for 10,000 years. If humans will not honor it, how can we trust them in any conflict? How can we feel safe sharing space with a species that refuses to end violence when logic demands it? Chen waited for the murmurs to die down before he spoke. His voice was calm, measured, and carried to every corner of the chamber. The Crithian vessels attacked a civilian ship without provocation. They threatened the lives of 47 non-combatants. They intended to steal cargo and leave our people stranded in deep space. And you want to discuss protocols? The protocols exist for everyone. Kreshivor shot back. Piracy is a crime, yes, but it is handled through proper channels. The humans had no right to refuse surrender. No right to treat prisoners of war as common criminals. Chen's expression hardened. They were not prisoners of war. They were pirates, criminals. And humanity does not extend the courtesies of war to those who prey on the defenseless. Your distinction is meaningless, the Telvanni delegate buzzed. The assembly recognizes surrender as an absolute. Once offered, it must be honored. This is not negotiable. Chen took a deep breath and walked to the edge of his platform. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. Then let me explain something about humanity that you clearly do not understand. You built your civilization on the principle that survival requires knowing when to quit. We built ours on the principle that survival requires never quitting. He gestured to the holographic display, and new footage appeared. Images from Earth's history. Ancient battles, medieval sieges, world wars. Images of humans fighting against impossible odds, refusing to surrender even when defeat seemed certain. This is the Battle of Thermopylae, Chen narrated as images of ancient warriors flashed by. 300 soldiers held a pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They all died. They knew they would die. They fought anyway. This is Stalingrad. This is Iwo Jima. This is the Warsaw Uprising. Over and over throughout our history, humans have chosen to fight when surrender was the logical choice. More images appeared. This is the crew of the USS Samuel B. Roberts, a tiny destroyer that charged a Japanese battleship fleet. This is the defenders of Bastonia, surrounded and outnumbered, who responded to a surrender demand with a single word. Nuts. This is the firefighters who ran into burning towers to save others. This is every human who has ever looked at impossible odds and decided that some things are worth dying for. The chamber was silent now. The delegates stared at the images with something like horror. The concept was so alien to most of them. Why would anyone fight when survival was possible through surrender? Chen turned off the display and faced the assembly directly. You want to know why we refused the Crithian surrender? Because in human culture, attacking civilians is not just a crime, it is an unforgivable act. Those who prey on the weak and defenseless do not deserve the protections of civilized warfare. They deserve only justice. Justice? Kreshivor's voice dripped with contempt. You mean revenge? No, Chen said quietly. Revenge would have been destroying their ships outright. Justice is taking them to trial, presenting evidence of their crimes and sentencing them according to law. Human law, since they attacked humans in human-protected space. The Telvanni delegate leaned forward. And what sentence does human law prescribe for piracy? That depends on the specifics of the crime, Chen replied. But for armed attack on civilians with intent to cause harm, the penalties are severe. Kreshivor stood to his full height, his crest flaring in anger. The Krithian conquered will not allow this insult to stand. Those pirates are Krithian citizens. They are entitled to Krithian justice. They attacked humans, Chen said. They face human justice. Then you leave us no choice, Kreshivor declared. The conquered will dispatch a fleet to retrieve our citizens. We will use whatever force is necessary. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Even among the delegates who had been critical of humanity's actions, the idea of an actual military conflict was alarming. The assembly was supposed to prevent such escalations. Chen did not look shocked. He looked tired. Ambassador Kreshivor, I strongly advise against that course of action. Your advice is not requested or required, Kreshivor shot back. The conquered will not be dictated to by a species that has been part of this community for barely 7 decades. You will learn to respect the protocols or you will face the consequences. Chen nodded slowly as if confirming something to himself. He tapped his communication device. This is Ambassador Chen to Fleet Command. Prepare for hostile action from Krithian forces. Authorization code Chen Delta 77. A voice responded instantly. Understood, Ambassador. Shall we deploy defensive forces? Negative, Chen said. And now there was something dangerous in his tone. Prepare for offensive action. If they want to teach us their rules of war, we will show them ours. Kreshivor laughed, a hissing sound that echoed through the chamber. You would threaten the conquered? We have over 3,000 warships. How many do you have in your small corner of space? A few hundred at most. We have enough, Chen said simply. This is madness, the Telvanni delegate protested. The assembly must intervene. We cannot allow an open conflict between member species. Then tell the Krithians to stand down, Chen suggested. Tell them to let human justice take its course. Tell them that attacking a civilian vessel has consequences. The Concord does not take orders from insects or mammals, Kreshivor declared. Our fleet is already mobilizing. 30 capital ships and supporting craft will arrive at your border within 3 standard days. You will release our citizens or we will take them by force. Chen looked at the Krithian ambassador for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but every delegate in the chamber heard him clearly. Ambassador Kreshivor, I am going to give you one chance to reconsider. Send your fleet if you must, but understand that if you do, if your ships cross into human space with hostile intent, we will consider it an act of war. And humans do not fight wars the way you do. We do not calculate acceptable losses. We do not measure success by territory gained. When humans fight, we fight to ensure the threat can never hurt us again. We fight until the enemy is broken, completely. Empty threats, Kreshivor sneered. I hope you are right, Chen said quietly. For your sake, I truly hope you are right. 3 days later, the Krithian battle group arrived at the human border. 30 warships, proud and confident, ready to demonstrate the power of the conquered. They sent a demand for the release of their citizens. The human response came not in words but in action. 60 human warships emerged from FTL space around the Krithian fleet, appearing so suddenly that several Krithian sensors initially registered the event as a malfunction. On the flagship of the Krithian fleet, Admiral Treshkar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The humans had not waited to be attacked. They had not scrambled defensive forces. They had jumped directly to the Krithian fleet's coordinates and surrounded them. The communication channel crackled. A human voice, female and cold as ice. Krithian fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the UHSN Retribution. You have entered human space with hostile intent. You have ignored our warnings. You have come here to threaten us, to take from us what we have lawfully claimed. That was a mistake. You wanted to teach us your rules of war. Let me teach you ours. We do not have any. Treshkar tried to respond, tried to invoke the protocols, tried to make the humans see reason, but his words were lost in the roar of human weapons fire as the battle began, and the Krithians learned in fire and blood what it meant to fight a species that had never learned how to surrender. 5 years had passed since the Krithian incident, and the galaxy had learned to live with the humans in their midst. It was not always comfortable. It was not always easy, but it was necessary. Captain Elena Vasquez sat on the deck of her house overlooking the Pacific Ocean on Earth. She had retired from active service 3 years ago, but the memories of that day in the outer margins still visited her regularly, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in quiet moments like this when the sun was setting and the waves were rolling in with ancient rhythm. She had become famous after the incident. The captain who had refused to surrender, who had fought 5 warships with a cargo hauler and won. There had been interviews, ceremonies, medals. Some people called her a hero. Others called her reckless. She tried not to think about either label too much. What she thought about instead was the 47 crew members who had served under her that day. All of them had survived. All of them had gone home to their families. That was what mattered. Not the tactics, not the politics, not the changing dynamics of galactic civilization. Just the simple fact that her people had lived. Her tablet chimed with an incoming call. She glanced at it and smiled. James Chen, her former first officer. He was commanding his own ship now, the merchant vessel New Dawn. She accepted the call. Captain, Chen greeted her with a grin. Or should I say retired captain? Just Elena is fine, she said. How are things out there? Chen's expression grew serious. Different. Safer in a lot of ways. You would not believe how empty the outer margin routes are now. No pirates anywhere. Word got around. That was the point, Elena said quietly. I know. I just wanted to tell you. The crew and I passed through the system where it happened yesterday. We were carrying medical supplies to the colonies just like we were 5 years ago. But this time nothing happened. No one bothered us. No one even came close. That is good to hear. Elena, Chen hesitated. Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing? I mean, the way things turned out, the war, all of it. Elena looked out at the ocean for a long moment before answering. Every day, James, every single day. But then I think about what would have happened if we had surrendered. The Crithians would have taken our cargo. Maybe they would have let us go. Maybe they would not have. Either way, they would have learned that humans were easy targets, and they would have kept attacking our ships, our colonies, our people. How many would have died eventually? You think we saved lives by fighting? I think we saved lives by refusing to be victims. There is a difference, Chen nodded slowly. The galaxy is still adjusting to us, you know. Some species are forming alliances with us. Others are avoiding human space completely. The Assembly is talking about updating the protocols. About time, Elena said. Their protocols assumed everyone was the same. Everyone valued survival over everything else. They never considered that a species might value dignity more than life. Is that what we value? Dignity? Elena smiled. We value the right to make our own choices, even if those choices are dangerous. Even if they are stupid. We would rather die free than live as someone's victims. I guess some species find that threatening, and others find it inspiring, Chen added. The Sarthan ambassador gave a speech last month. She said that watching humanity fight changed how her people think about themselves. They are starting to ask why they surrender so easily, why they accept that might makes right. That could be dangerous, Elena observed. Or it could be the beginning of something better, a galaxy where species stand up for themselves, where the weak are not automatically prey for the strong. Elena considered that. Maybe. Or maybe we just started an arms race that will end badly for everyone. Time will tell. They talked for a while longer about small things, about mutual friends, about Chen's new ship. After the call ended, Elena sat in the growing darkness and thought about the future. The galaxy had called humanity many things since the Crithian incident. Warlike, aggressive, dangerous, unstable. But it had also called them reliable allies, fierce protectors and stubborn friends. Species that aligned with humanity found themselves safer from pirates and aggressive neighbors. Species that threatened human interests found themselves facing consequences that the old protocols had never prepared them for. Piracy in human-controlled space had dropped to effectively zero. No one wanted to find out if the stories about human retaliation were true. Trade was flourishing because merchants knew their cargo would be protected. Human colonies were growing rapidly, secure in the knowledge that the fleet would come if anyone threatened them. But there were costs too. Relations with some species had fractured. The Crithian conquered maintained a cold peace with humanity, but there was no trust there. Several species had withdrawn from border regions near human space, afraid of what the unpredictable humans might do. The assembly had split into factions, those who welcomed human strength and those who feared it. Elena's tablet chimed again. This time it was a news feed. Another story about humanity's place in galactic politics. The headline read, "Humanity, the species that changed everything." She read the article with tired eyes. It talked about how human military doctrine was influencing other species, how human concepts of refusing surrender and fighting to the last had spread to several younger civilizations, how the old order of calculated warfare and mathematical surrender was giving way to something new and uncertain. The article ended with a question. Has humanity made the galaxy safer or more dangerous? Elena closed the tablet without finishing. It was the wrong question. The right question was, has humanity made the galaxy more honest? For 10,000 years, the Assembly's protocols had worked because everyone agreed to live by them. But those protocols only worked because no one challenged them. They were rules imposed by the strong on the weak, dressed up in the language of civilization and logic. Surrender when outmatched because resistance is illogical. Accept your place in the hierarchy because that is how peace is maintained. Humanity had walked into that system and said no, not because humans were more violent or less intelligent, but because humans had learned a different lesson from their history. They had learned that rules imposed by the strong are not laws, they are suggestions. They had learned that peace purchased through submission is not peace, it is just delayed conflict. They had learned that sometimes fighting and losing is better than surrendering and living, because at least in fighting you prove that you cannot be taken for granted. The galaxy had not liked that lesson. But the galaxy was learning it anyway. Elena stood up and walked to the edge of her deck. The stars were coming out, distant and cold. Somewhere up there, human ships were moving through space. Some were cargo vessels like the Wandering Star, carrying goods and supplies. Some were warships, standing guard over trade routes and colonies. Some were exploration vessels, pushing into unknown regions because humans could not resist the urge to see what was over the next horizon. Every single one of those ships carried the same message, whether they knew it or not. The message that had started in the outer margin 5 years ago and had spread across the galaxy like a shockwave. The message that humanity would keep broadcasting until every species understood it. You cannot make us surrender. You cannot make us submit. You cannot make us accept that your strength gives you the right to dictate our fate. We will trade with you, ally with you, befriend you, but we will not bow to you. And if you try to force us, you will learn what humans are capable of when they decide that something is worth dying for. It was not a message of aggression. It was a message of boundaries. This far and no further. These people are under our protection. These principles are not negotiable. And if you push us, you will not face a calculated response. You will face a species that has been fighting for survival since before we could speak, and we have gotten very good at it. Elena thought about Captain Rodriguez, the man whose name had become a protocol. A naval officer from centuries ago who had faced impossible odds and chose to fight anyway. She wondered what he would think about humanity now, spreading across the stars, carrying his legacy with them. She hoped he would be proud. The tablet chimed one more time. A message from the United Human Space Navy. They wanted her to speak at the Academy graduation ceremony next month. They wanted her to tell the new officers about that day in the outer margin, about the decision she made, about what it meant to be human in a galaxy that did not understand humanity. Elena looked at the message for a long time. Then she typed a simple reply. I will be there, because that was what humans did. They showed up. They stood their ground. They refused to disappear into the quiet of space, refused to become just another species following someone else's rules. They insisted on being heard, being seen, being respected. The galaxy had rules for warfare. Humanity had rules for survival. And in the end, only one set of rules mattered, the ones you were willing to die for. Elena Vasquez looked up at the stars and smiled. Somewhere up there, another cargo ship was making another routine run. And if pirates appeared, if threats emerged, that ship would fight. The crew would stand their ground. They would refuse to surrender. Because they were human, and humans had learned long ago that some things were more important than living. The docking clamps of Kepler Station groaned as they secured the ESS Resilience to berth 47. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, watching through the viewport as station personnel gave her ship the same look they always did. Disgust mixed with pity. She couldn't blame them. The Resilience looked like someone had welded together parts from 6 different vessels and hoped for the best. Because that's exactly what it was. The hull was a patchwork of mismatched plates. Some sections gleamed with fresh titanium alloy. Others showed the darker, scorched metal of salvaged warship armor. Exposed conduits ran along the exterior where proper ships had smooth surfaces. The engine nacelles didn't match. One was clearly from a mining vessel, the other from a decommissioned frigate. Solar panels jutted out at odd angles, collecting every bit of energy they could. It was ugly. It was embarrassing. It was home. "Docking complete, Captain," said Lieutenant Park from the navigation station. "Station control says we're clear to disembark for resupply." "Good. Tell Webb he has 48 hours to fix whatever he's been complaining about this week." A voice crackled over the internal comms. "I heard that, Captain. And it's the portside plasma coupling. Again, I swear that thing was built by drunk engineers. It was built by you, Webb. My point stands." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb had constructed the Resilience from scrap and spare parts over 3 years. Every system had a story. Every repair had been done with whatever materials they could find. The ship violated a dozen safety regulations and probably twice as many aesthetic ones. But it flew. More than that, it survived. She made her way through the corridors toward the airlock. The interior matched the exterior. Pipes ran exposed along the ceiling. Some walls were bare metal. Others had panels from completely different ship classes. Everything hummed and rattled in a way that would horrify a proper engineer. Webb called it character. Sarah called it barely functional. They were both right. The station's main concourse was crowded. Kepler Station sat at the edge of human-controlled space, making it a hub for trade with the dozens of alien species that made up the Galactic Council. Sarah saw Threenoids with their crystalline bodies, Velkari merchants with their 6 arms juggling data pads, and a group of Osean diplomats discussing something in their musical language. Then she saw the Corvathians. They were impossible to miss. Tall and elegant, they moved through the crowd like royalty among peasants. Their skin had a faint golden shimmer. Their uniforms were pristine, decorated with medals and honors. Every movement was precise and controlled. They represented the Corvathian Empire, the most powerful military force in this sector of the galaxy. At the center of the group walked Ambassador Thelzar. Sarah recognized him from the diplomatic briefings. He had been responsible for the Corvathian expansion that had absorbed 17 systems in the past decade. Always through military superiority, always without mercy for those who resisted. She tried to move past them, but Thelzar's eyes locked onto her uniform. The patch on her shoulder marked her as a captain in Earth Space Service. His expression shifted from disinterest to amusement. "A human captain," he said, his voice carrying across the concourse. Others stopped to watch. "How quaint. Tell me, which vessel do you command?" Sarah knew a trap when she heard one. "The ESS Resilience, docked at berth 47. Thelzar pulled up a holographic display from his wrist device. It showed the station's docking registry. When he saw the image of the Resilience, he laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was genuine mocking laughter that echoed through the concourse. That collection of scrap is a registered military vessel?" He turned to his entourage. "Look at this. The humans send their garbage to the stars and call it a fleet." The other Corvathians joined in the laughter. So did some of the alien observers. Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her expression neutral. She had heard worse. Every port they visited brought the same reaction. "The Resilience serves humanity well enough," she said quietly. "Well enough?" Thelzar stepped closer. "I have waste disposal units more impressive than your ship. How did your species ever earn a seat on the Galactic Council? Surely not through military prowess. Perhaps it was pity? Perhaps it was because we have something to offer," Sarah replied. "Such as?" Thelzar gestured at the hologram of the Resilience. "Expertise in assembling trash? The Corvathian Empire has been expanding for 3 centuries. We have fleets of vessels that make your entire navy look like a child's toy collection. We have weapons that could turn your homeworld to glass. We have shields that could withstand anything your primitive technology could produce." "I'm sure you do, Ambassador." "You should be sure, because I come here today not just for trade negotiations. I come with a message for humanity." Thelzar's voice grew serious. "The Empire's expansion continues. We have identified 17 more systems for incorporation. 8 of them border human space. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Council Charter forbids aggressive expansion into claimed territories. Claimed by whom? By species barely capable of space travel? The Council recognizes strength, Captain. And humanity has shown nothing but weakness. Your ships are scrap. Your stations are small. Your colonies are scattered and poorly defended. When the Empire comes, and we will come, there will be no resistance worth mentioning. Is that a threat, Ambassador? It is a statement of fact. We give you 6 months. Use that time to prepare your affairs. Evacuation plans, perhaps, or surrender terms. The choice is yours. Thelzar smiled, showing perfect teeth. But do not think to stand against us. We have seen your ship, Captain. We have seen what humanity calls a military. It is laughable. The ambassador and his entourage walked away, leaving Sarah standing alone in the concourse. The crowd slowly returned to their business, though many cast pitying glances her way. She stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing. Her communicator buzzed. Webb's voice came through.
Captain?
You need to see something. I'm at the cargo bay. She made her way through the station, her mind racing. 6 months! The Corvathian Empire was giving humanity 6 months before they began their invasion. High Command had known this was coming. That's why they had been building ships, retrofitting civilian vessels, preparing for a war no one wanted to fight. Webb waited for her at the cargo bay entrance. He was a short man with permanently grease-stained hands and wild hair that never quite stayed in place. He looked worried. I heard what happened in the concourse, he said. Station gossip travels fast. Let me guess. Everyone's talking about how the mighty Corvathian Empire just stepped on the pathetic humans, pretty much. But that's not why I called you. He led her into the bay where the Resilience's cargo was being loaded. Look at what came in the supply shipment. Sarah looked at the crates. They were marked with Earth Space Service logos, but the contents listing made her eyes widen. Military-grade power cells, experimental ammunition, classified weapons components. High Command is sending us war supplies, Webb said quietly, which means they know it's coming, and they think we're going to be part of it. Sarah walked back to the viewport and stared at the Resilience. It looked like junk. It looked like a ship that would fall apart in a strong breeze. But she knew better. She knew what Webb had built into that frame. She knew the tricks and modifications that made it more than it appeared. Let them laugh, she said finally. Let the Corvathians think we're weak. Let them see scrap and garbage, Captain. When they come, Webb, they're going to learn something. They're going to learn that humans don't build pretty ships. We build ships that survive. And when they realize that, she smiled grimly, it's going to be too late. Outside the viewport, the Corvathian battlecruiser hung in space like a work of art, all smooth curves and gleaming metal, beautiful and deadly. Sarah turned away from it and headed back to her ship. The ugly one, the one that looked like trash, the one that just might save them all.